Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amém. Amém.
So you can see that we're back in Genesis and continuing. And they, of course, Adam and Eve have eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they've sown fig leaves because they're aware they're naked, and God is calling out to them, and he has asked Adam if he's eaten from the tree that he was told not to eat from, right? And let's take a look at here. Okay. So Vayomer Hashem Elohim leisha. So God turns to the woman and he says, Mazot asit, what did you do? Vatomer ha'isha hanachash hishi ani va'ochel. And so, by the way, it's so cute, right? Everybody's making excuses, right? Okay, so it says the woman says, well, the snake led me astray, so I ate. So we're actually looking at this up here. This is actually where we're starting. The excuse that Adam makes, which is Vayomer ha'adam, the man said, Ha'isha asher natata imadi, the woman that you gave with me, he natna li, she gave it to me from the tree, and I ate. Right? Oh my gosh! So here we go. Haisha, this is of course. Haisha asher natata, the woman that you gave. Tana Rabbanan. So we've got a early source, right? Mishnaic times, and this is what they said: Adam Harishon kfui tovahaya, that first man was he lacked appreciation, right? Literally, kafui is to cover something. Kafui tova means covering up the good, right? So Torah Temimah is going to analyze that a little bit more. But how do we know this? Shine'emar, because he says, Ha'isha asher natata imadi, the woman that you gave with me, he not nali, right? She gave me mina eitz from the tree, va'ochal, and I ate, va'ochel, excuse me. This is from Avodah Zara, page 5b. Let's take a look. All right, so Piresh Rashi. So I believe this is the Rashi in the Talmud that we're talking about. Lashon Ganaihu, right? This, when I believe he's referring to Adam's response, he says it's kind of a put down, right? It's not respectful. It's disrespectful. It's a disrespectful expression. Shetoleh hakalkala b'matanato, because what he's doing is he's making the improper behavior, right, on the one who gave it to him, right, b'matanato shel makom, of God's gift to him, right. He wants to base the kilkul, the messing up, right, the ruination, based. He's trying to turn it back on God, right. V'hu as'a lo la'ezer, and God, had made her for him as a helper. Right? That was the reason why Eve was there, was that they would be partners and she would help him. Kan lashono, end of quote of Rashi. Ubepirish halashon kisui tova, right? And in terms of explaining the actual language of kisui tova, covering up, kfui tova, right? That expression, kfui tova. Piresh Rashi explains, she'ein makir, right, that he doesn't recognize, he's not able to recognize lachazik tova leva'aleha, or leva'alim, to be able to apportion goodness to the ones who gave it, right? Not willing to do that. But Tosafot, remember Rashi's grandsons who usually arguing with grandpa, right? Pirshu, they explained, Mi she'eino rotzeh, that what we're talking about is someone who doesn't want to lachazik tova b'davar. He doesn't want to acknowledge goodness. Okay, and there's a difference. Akan l'shonam, that's the end of their quote, right? So Rashi is saying he doesn't understand, right? He's not able to recognize the goodness. And the Tosafot says that he doesn't want to recognize the goodness. Upashtut ha'inyan more kepirush Tosafot. And he says, and if you look at this situation that we're talking about now, he's saying that the sense, the more obvious sense of it follows Tosafot's understanding of this, right? De la Piresh Rashi Kasher. He says because there's a problem with Rashi's explanation. De acharesh chaser lo hergesh hakara, right? That because if we're saying that he was not capable of recognizing this, im kain mai shayach kfui tova, right? In which case, what relevance is this idea of covering up, right? Of covering up the good? Shepirush hamila kafui, because he says the explanation of this word kafui, hu mi'inyan kisui, we're talking about covering up, right? A conscious covering up. Kamo, and he gives an example. Kofe alav kli. So, for example, it says it covers it over with a vessel from Psachim, tractate on Psachim, page 8b, right? That's the kafui, that you're covering it up. makirim, shayach. And if in fact you're simply incapable of recognizing the good, right? It's you just aren't capable. You don't have enough intelligence to see it, or the sensitivity to see it. What are we talking about covering up, right? That is a conscious, active act. V'gam inyan zeh, and not only that, the Adam Harishon Mevoar, right? That with regards to the first man, with regards to Adam, Kepirusha Tosafot, as the Tosafot explain, Shekfuye Tova, right? That those who are Kfui Tova, to whom you can refer to as Kfuye Tova, Be'emet Makirim Bahatova, they actually know. They know that that they've been done a favor. They know that there's something good that was done for them. Rak einam rotzim lohodot, but the fact is they don't want to acknowledge it. Shaharei bevadai lo shayach, because you cannot say about Adam, right? You can absolutely not say regarding Adam, shelo hikir Adam betovaton zo. Right, that he did not realize that God had given him Eve as a great favor, that this was something so good that had happened to him that he had Eve. Why? How do we know this? Shaharei b'vadai lo shay. Right, I'm sorry. Let's see. Yeah, right here. Sorry, I missed a line. Forgive me. Okay. Shaharei meforash. We say explicitly. Amru, they said explicitly, this is a reference to Yevamot, the tractate Yevamot, 63a. Shelo nitkarera dato. We had this, that he wasn't satisfied. Adam was not satisfied ad shenivra'a Chava, until Eve was created. Remember, we had that story about his relations with the animals, etc., and none of it satisfied him until Eve. V'chein amar, who bets more? And not only that, we have a verse, right, where Adam is actually saying, etzem me'atzmi, bone of my bone. He says that about Eve, right? Ve'eliyahu, right, and Elijah, we're talking about a story in the Gemara. Elijah the prophet, amar Rabbi Yossi, he told Rabbi Yossi, sheha isha me'ira einav shel adam. I think this is a lovely expression. He says, the woman enlightens the eyes of a person, right? Try to understand, what do we mean by that, right? Gives them a measure of understanding, right? And, when you think of someone who's, the idea of a person's eyes brightening, right? There's a certain sense of joy that a woman is able to provide a man. And she sets him up on his legs, right? She gives him a certain stability, right? Yivamochan. So Same place in Tractate Yevamot. Ve'ien la'el bet yudchet. He says, check above. We had some when Eve was created, right? We had some comments on that, right? So I think this is chapter 2, verse 18. V'chein mehara'ia hashniya, right? And regarding the second proof, sheheviu b'gemara, that they brought in the Gemara, sheyisrael hayu kfuyei tova. So there's another example. This exactly what do we mean by kafui tova, right? That's what Torah Temimah is trying to understand. This expression, right? Does it mean you simply aren't aware, or which is Rashi, or does it mean you don't want to be aware? You don't want to recognize it. You're covering it up, right? And of course, he's saying it's the intentional covering up, right? And here's an example that the Israelites were unappreciative, mimasha amru, when they said regarding the manna, v'nafshenu katza, and we're sort of sick of belechem haklokel, over this insubstantial bread. We just read about this in Parshat Bahalotcha, where they complain about the manna. Ubavadai hayu margishim, and we know for certain they were able to sense umakirim and recognize the tovat haman, just what a benefit the manna was. Shebalahem benachat uvenakel, because it was delivered to them in such an easy way, right? Imagine you could go into the supermarket and help yourself, and the supermarket, of course, is right in your backyard. You go and you help yourself. Basically, it's a pantry, right? That's it. Because they go out and we read we'll read when it comes to the manna, right? That it would fall in the morning and there was sort of dew and the manna would fall on top of the dew. And then I think there was a covering to that of dew. So that it was nice and clean. And we'll keep going. Let me just keep going with this, right? And this manna, it had whatever you wanted to taste of, right? It didn't taste like onions and garlic. It didn't taste like that, but it tasted like anything else, right? So whatever you wanted it to taste like, it tasted like that. Wow, right? And they're complaining about it. Kenodab Agadot, as we are told in the Agadot, in the legendary material. And he says, he gives us a reference. Elaine lefanenu, look ahead, Parshat Bahalotcha, in Parshat Bahalotcha. Ela shelo ratzu lahodot. They didn't want to acknowledge. So profound, right? I mean, I'm sorry. I think this is such an amazing commentary on human nature, and to look into ourselves when we're complaining and looking for reasons not to like something, right? The bride was too pretty, right? That was amazing element of human nature. Comments before we move on? Okie doke, we will take one more. So he's spoken to Adam. Adam's given his excuse. He's spoken to Eve. Eve has given her excuse, and then goes on, verse 14. Vayoma Hashem Elohim el hanachash. God says to the snake, Ki asita zot, because you did this, aru atami kol abema. You are more cursed than any other creature. Umikol chayat hasadeh, any beast of the field, agachoncha telech, you shall go on your belly, etc., etc., etc. Notice, by the way, he doesn't say to the serpent, what did you do? Why did you do it? Doesn't say that. Just tells him immediately, he tells him the consequences, right? So, Vayom Hashem el hanachash. So the Lord God said to the snake, the serpent, Tanya, again, excuse me, an early source, Rabbi Omer. Rabbi, this is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, who was the editor of the Mishnah. He was the one who made the leader of the community in Israel, who made the decision to put the oral Torah into writing. Biklala, when it comes to the curse or stating the negative consequences, matchilin min hakatan. So if you have 3 people or 4 people that you're going to have to give them a verdict, right? A negative verdict or that you're going to have to condemn, you start with the least important one. Shebatchila nitkalel nachash, because if we look at the order going on here, we see that the snake was punished first, or cursed first, va'acharav chava, and after the snake, Eve, va'achareha, it should be, and after her, Adam, Shinemar, as we see, Vayom Hashem Elohim El Hanachash, and the Lord God said to the serpent, V'hadar leisha, and after that he says it to the woman, Ula Adam, and after that to Adam. So brachot, tractate brachot. Ni'et tam hadavar, it would appear that the rationale for this, mishum de'ulai betoch kach, because possibly in the process, tashuv midat hadin, right? So the quality of judgment will be relented a little, that there's some sense that the quality of judgment will be relented, or tit or ezo zachut la hagen, or possibly some positive statement, some reason can be given to prevent the curse from taking place, finding something good and not something to defend. Yishaer hagadol, and so that the one who is the most important will remain lehenot mehaganazo, to benefit from this defense. So, in other words, let's suppose you don't find a defense for the snake, but you find a defense for Eve, right? For why people did this. Well, then Adam would automatically be defended, right? And check out ahead of us, but Parshat Shmini, in the Parsha of Shmini in Leviticus, the Pasuk Vayomer Moshe el Aaron ve'el Elazar, where it says, this is of course after Nadav and Avihu are killed, and it says, and Moses said to Aaron and to Elazar, that in that particular case, where you're going to speak of a benefit, right, and a blessing, you begin with the most important. V'yein masha katuv sham, and check out what we've written there. Well, we'll do one more. Vayomer Hashem Elokim elachash. So the Lord God said to the snake, Mikan she'en to'anin lamaisut, and from this you learn that you do not give an opportunity for a seducer to defend themselves. Right? The fact is that the serpent clearly seduced Eve and ultimately Adam, and for that he isn't given an opportunity to defend himself. Umay hava le'liton. Well, what could the serpent have argued in his defense? Divrei harav, the words of the master, v'divrei hatalmid, and the words of the student, divrei mishomim. Who does one listen to? Divrei harav shomin. You're supposed to listen to the words of the master. That's who you listen to. Well, in this case, the master is God. He said, don't. And the student, quote, quote, is the serpent. He said, go ahead, give it a try. Who should you be listening to? In other words, why would Adam and Eve have listened to me? They should have listened to what you told them. They have no excuse. You told them not to do it. So why don't you give me a chance to defend myself? Well, that opens a can of worms. All right, let's take a look. The Iyen Baba Kama, and take a look at Baba Kama, the tractate Baba Kama, Nun Vav, page 55, Aleph on the A side of the page. Daha de Peturim Mitam, that as regards those who are excused from the basis of Divrei Harav, Divrei Hatalmid, etc., right? that who do you listen to? Who do you pay attention? Right? Hurak b'dinei adam. That only works when we're talking about a human situation, right? Where two people are involved or more than two people are involved. In that case, that is an effective defense of saying you cannot hold me fully responsible because they are partially responsible, and ultimately they are. They shouldn't have listened to me. Aval b'dinei shamayim, but regards to judgments of heaven, chayavin, you're going to still be in trouble. You can't use that argument. Vehine lefize, and based on this, lichora, right? It would appear, ein ze ta'ana kan benachash, she'akadosh baruch hu dano. So if that's the case, right, I believe, unless I'm saying the wrong way around, right? I'm telling you what occurred to me when I was preparing this, and whether or not he's saying that that this reason given in the Gemara won't work if you look at this Baba Kama explanation, right? So let's just keep going. For Omnam, and indeed, HaTosafot Sham, the Tosafot there, Ba'aru, they explain, Derak besocher edei sheker, that you cannot, in other words, in the case where someone intentionally hired false witnesses, or chayavin b'dinei shamayim, right? Then you would be held liable in the judgment regarding the judgment of heaven, right? In other words, if you hired false witnesses to testify against someone or whatever. In other words, there was that intention to do something that was against the mitzvot, against something that God had commanded, then that's the only case where this argument would not work. Aval ba'amira ba'ama, but simply saying something to someone, peturim gam mi binei shanayim, that regards, okay, so I'm understanding this better now, that you would not be accountable from judgments of heaven. So I think here, dinei shamayim and dinei adam mean a human court as opposed to a divine court, meaning whether you would be held liable in a human court and nevertheless held liable by heaven, right? That you'd still owe it to on the divine level, on the spiritual level. But here you would the example given by Tosafot, where you actually hired someone to set someone up, you would be held liable by a human court. The tam davar, and the reason for this, mishum de amira ba'alma, because if you're just saying this to someone, if you're just arguing or trying to mislead someone, if shar lo lehitnatzel, he is going to be able to save himself. Lomar, right, that he to say de savur shelo lishmalo. You could say, yeah, I know I said that, but I never expected him to really take me seriously, right? I mean, you could say that and perhaps say it truthfully. Say, yeah, I did say that. It's true, I did. But, here, he knows what the law is. I never thought he was going to take me seriously. And it's possible. It's possible. Okay. Masha Enken, where you couldn't say that, but socher with someone who intentionally went and hired witnesses, right? Sheyada, because he knew in that case, shebavadai hishmalo, in that case, he knew. He was obviously setting things up to prove that this person would listen to him. In other words, I'm trying to reconstruct the case for you, and apparently this person is, let's say, I think the example that might work is, I want you to buy this item, right? I want you to invest in this item, and there are other people who come and say, yeah, we invested and it was great. You really need to do this. Well, if you go to that extent, then clearly you're trying to get this person. You can't use the excuse of, well, I didn't think he'd listen to me, even though I hired witnesses to mislead him, right? You can't do that. Okay. Well, the and for this reason, nechakan, here it works. Shehahasata haita b'amira lamala, ba'alma. And that, in fact, this in this case, the seduction was purely through words. Okay. Let's see. This could be, I'm trying to think. Right. Okay. I think he's saying v'chein, if this is an I, is this a mem? Right. Okay. V'chein meforash, I'm going to assume that's a mem. Right. I'm looking to see. See this letter here. Looks a lot like this letter here. V'chein meforash. And so it's explained. B'shach, that's the Siftei Kohen. It's a commentary, L'choshen Mishpat, to the Shulchan Aruch, the part Choshen Mishpat, Siman Lamed Bet. This would be chapter 32, Sif Katan Gimel, paragraph 3. Yein Sham. Check it out. So what we're saying is that the reason why God didn't give the snake that opportunity is because that argument would have worked. It would have been a legitimate defense. And that's why God didn't give the snake that opportunity, because God knew he was trying to seduce Eve. And that's why he doesn't give the snake that opportunity. So, and we will stop here for today. And I will stop the share. All right. Comments and thoughts.
So accountability is ambiguous, right? I mean, really, it becomes, I mean, in this case, it's somewhat ambiguous, right? Because you've gone back and forth, right? God didn't give the snake the opportunity. And then we talk about the cases of, basically people and people. And, because today, I mean, people always try to make the case now that, hey, it's not just my fault because somebody else, did this. So it still feels like accountability is ambiguous throughout this, except when it comes to the clear-cut case of the snake and God, and then God said no, you're accountable. So in that case, but all others based on, I don't know. That's my input. It feels like
right. Okay, Alex.
Yeah, I just take away from it that it's the more complex the orchestrations that I think, if you could call it a greater evil. Someone sitting back in the case of the snake and saying, you know what, here's what I'm going to do to get this end result. So people become more manipulators and orchestration people. It's playing God. And we all do stupid things. You react, oh, well, you're the one who gave me the wife. So, and it's fairly easy to back away from that. But to back away from the fact that, oh, well, I planned this all out, took me a few days, I made sure this guy did that. That's not, whoops, I made a mistake. Like your reaction to, well, God, you gave me the woman.
Right. See, the issue here is seduction. That's the issue. Nobody, nobody's accusing Eve of she wasn't trying to seduce Adam. Okay, at least that's the understanding. However, the snake absolutely had that intention. So let's see if I can summarize in some ways the argument that's going on here, or the point that's being made here. Okay, I think the point that's being made here is that there's a question as to why didn't God, after all, allow, in other words, how well does this argument work? Because the argument is that had God given the snake that opportunity, the snake would have had a good defense. That's the point that's being made. And that's why God didn't allow the snake to come up with that defense. Now, in that commentary, right, the point is being made, wait a second. It's like Torah Temimah is saying, wait a second. Who says it's such a good defense? Right? That it does say with regards to heaven, right, that is not a good defense. But we're saying it is a good defense. So where does this exactly land us? And I think that in this particular case, it's saying the fact that, he defines where it is a good case and where it isn't, and that only if you can show that the person intentionally went about to try and seduce this other person or speak in this way, can you say that defense won't work. So I think what he's trying to come out at the end is to say God could not give the snake that opportunity because it would have been a good defense.
Yeah. Rabbi,
Yeah.
you're right on all you're saying, but I would think this way. This is my thought only, that God made the snake, God made Adam and Eve, and God was testing them. When God said, my command is don't eat on the tree of knowledge, don't do that. He was testing them to see if they would do it. Humans have emotions and they have choices. And God was testing. God made the snake a demon. He made the snake a demon. And he made the snake. He made both Adam and Eve. He made everything. God knew everything was going on. And that's my opinion only.
Okay. So, of course, I believe this is the argument of the Rubayat of Omakayam, right? And there's also suggestions that God always intended Adam and Eve to eat from that tree. The greatest temptation is to tell someone they're not allowed to do it, right? That's a classic example. All right. Having said that and trying to think through more, okay, we get into something very, very deep, which has to do with the purpose of life, okay? And that part of our very being here is that opportunity to make a decision as to how we want to live our lives. And if we don't have the choice of good or evil, if we only have the choice of good, then there's no purpose. There's no purpose to living. That in some ways, what makes life worth living is the fact that every day and every moment, there's a drama before us. And that drama is, how are we going to negotiate what we're going through? How are we going to negotiate our relationships? How are we going to curb that part of ourselves that says, wait for it, ain't no one going to tell me what to do?
Yeah.
And thank you, Zoom, for giving me that opportunity. All right. And by the way, I am pretty convinced at this point that the reason why we pray and why we repeat the same prayers day in and day out has to do with the same kind of strategy that a team that's going to compete well does, which is you go through your practice and you practice and you practice and you practice and you practice so that it comes almost like second nature. Because when you're actually on the court and when you're actually facing those situations where you're in heavy competition, it is so stressful that you don't have time to think. You have to be able to react to all kinds of situations pretty much automatically. And if you look at those prayers, you will see they are so filled with positive ideas of how to deal with it, that's why we do it 3 times a day. And so many of those prayers are exactly the same, because you don't want to have to think twice in those situations that you encounter in life as to how you need to behave. So that's it for today. Thanks, at least for recording.